and it's a fraught relationship, right? That great country, wonderful opportunities. Um, I've been lucky that my forebears, my father, my uncles, those people were some pretty resilient bunch, and also just blessed with an intellect, right? That allowed them to, and some emotional reserves that allowed them to withstand some pretty horrific stuff, and to withstand it in a way that they were, I'm not going to say unharmed, but still able to thrive, right?
Um, I have a special relationship to the national anthem, for instance. Apparently, when I was a little boy, 4 or 5, maybe 3, I used to fight to stay awake in my rocking chair in front of the television. I'd fall asleep. But when the national anthem would come, I'd wake up and I'd stand up and I'd salute. Now, what's that about? I mean, what do you do with a 3 or 4 year old who chooses that that's what he's going to do? He's going to fight to stay awake to do that. It's really something. Um, I, um, I love the idea of America. I feel committed to remaining prophetic, and by that I mean um, uh, acknowledging of uh, the faults, but not and willing to look at where these faults will bring us if we don't correct them. And what I hope is an unflagging hope in the possibility. Uh, I think that the fact that I feel patriotic, or that any black person feels patriotic at all, is a gift from God, uh, given the historic ambivalence that our nation has shown towards its citizenry of African descent. And that's about the kindest thing I can say.
I love doing these interviews with you guys. I really do.
I love being able to be a part of it. It's special.
So, what's your relationship with America?
Well, I had a little bit of chance to think about it. I feel I have to remind us that we just inaugurated the 46th president, and um, uh, and I watched it. I watched the inauguration, and so I feel something of a disadvantage, contextually trying to think about that, because I'm automatically in a more I might be biased about, or more optimistic or hopeful as a result. That if you watched any of it, it was pretty powerful experience. It always is, watching the inauguration of the presidential inauguration. This was an unusual one in so many ways, right? In the wake of the 2 weeks ago, a bunch of crazies taking over the Capitol, and we're in the pandemic. We have the first Black woman, first Asian woman, first woman to hold that high an office, national office. It was just a beautiful thing to watch, and so it just reminded me of something I've always had as a part of the way I saw the world, that I am an American, and and it reminded me of what growing up in Washington, D.C. meant. I grew up in an all-Black community in the nation's capital. And I think, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I'm inclined to believe that patriotism that's always been at the center of how Black folks have understood themselves was more intensified in Washington, D.C. Even though I grew up in a segregated community, I didn't know any white people. I was looking at the inauguration, and I was remembering that for the first 14 years of my life, I said the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And for the first 14 years of my life, I had no white people in my life in any direct way. Every teacher I had was Black, more Black men than Black women. And I said the Pledge of Allegiance every day. Mm. And I don't know at this moment how that, if that set me up in a different kind of way, than folks who, I'm sure the Pledge of Allegiance was being said in a lot of places. In fact, my wife told me that in her Catholic school, they were saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day. But as, it made me think about the surroundings. I didn't know anybody, I don't think, who wasn't patriotic in the sense who didn't think a lot about what it meant to be a Black man or a Black person in America.
I used to feel proud, just kind of like one of those inborn prides, not unlike what, graduates of our prep school feel, in the presence of anyone else with the prep school. We just assume something, an assumed relationship to them and they to us, and I used to feel like when and I haven't done a great deal of traveling abroad, but that when people say you're American, that I recognize in them some envy and some admiration. And now I still see that. I see the envy, I see the admiration, but I also see that they don't know what they're looking at. They're looking at an image. They're looking at a view of America. If I have time, or if it's an appropriate setting, I may engage with them to try to correct their misunderstanding of what America is and how America is. But usually I just say, okay, this is part of what it is that I have to, part of my burden.
A lot of the thinking I've done over the last 25 years, and maybe particularly over the past 5, when I've spent way more time thinking about race and racism and how Black people have been treated in America, and including in my family. It felt pretty challenging today in particular. I'm thinking, and I didn't realize this stuff was behind me until earlier. So you've seen this before, Eric. This is my father, James Hawkins. I feel very emotional. I felt that way even watching the inauguration.
Today you felt that? Yeah,
watching the inauguration and thinking about, I saw Barack Obama and the First Lady, Michelle Obama. And it brought me back because I was thinking about this interview and thinking about being an American and being a Black American. It brought me back to 2000. When did Barack Obama became president? 2012? Is that right?
2000.
Yeah, 2013. He was elected 2012. And oh, so the other thing is, I'll just show you this. This is my father's certificate awarded by a grateful nation in recognition of devoted and selfless consecration to the service of our country in the armed forces of the United States. And it's the president's signature. We got when my father was buried at the Veterans Cemetery. My father almost never talked about being in the armed services, but he bore himself, his bearing as a man, I think took on a certain kind of dignity that I imagine had to do with just the integrity and honor he felt being American, serving his country. And he didn't talk about that stuff with us at all.
Did this and this and this tonight.
Yeah. Well, I had a conversation with a neighborhood kid, a kid who lived in my neighborhood, and had a conversation with him on Facebook maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And I thought he was engaging in a gaslighting conversation, but I was willing to acknowledge that maybe he just didn't understand. And the conversation was regarding whether or not Black people should support the Republican Party because Republicans freed the slaves. To which I wanted to respond, said, yes, and the parties have switched places since then. That when the Democrats decided to sign the Civil Rights Bill, that we knew we were going to lose the people who were essentially the Dixiecrats to the Republican Party, and that we were handing certain people over to the South who really just didn't want to abide by that. Now, I'm assuming that everybody knows that that's the history of America, and yet it's silly to assume. But it spawned a much larger conversation where he kept said, why do you want to talk about race? When you talk about race, it makes racism persist. He said, my family are made up of immigrants too, and we just want to be Americans. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I absolutely agree with you. I just want to be Americans. He said, I just wanted to be American when my neighbors called me nigger and jungle bunny and jigaboo and told me to go back to Africa when we were growing up. I just want to be American when they peppered our house with Klan brochures. And I just want to be American when people fired bullets through my house. And I wish you had been there to help me, since you lived in the neighborhood with me, to help me stand up so I could just be an American.
Yeah.
Right? And because you say you just want to be American, said, I know that you will stand with me as we fight this injustice that continues. He's never really responded to me again.